The single most fundamental question in history. We have to talk about how chronology even came into existence and why we all settled on this particular way of counting time. Essentially, all of history is just one giant timeline, where every centimeter, every millimeter is a year, a century, a millennium. Without this timeline, we simply can't understand when anything happened. And let's be honest, for trying to make sense of the past, that's total chaos. We say things like, the 40th century BC, or as some people still prefer to say, before the birth of Christ. Stop right there. What are these reference points? Who, when, and where decided that these specific moments should divide time into before and after? And most importantly, why did we all agree to it? The truth is, timekeeping is a purely human invention, created solely for our own convenience. Here's a shocking fact. For a long time, as long as humans didn't need it, they didn't worry about time at all. There are still tribes in the Amazon today who fundamentally don't know what time is. You could spend hours explaining that it's 12 o'clock or 12:35, but they won't understand the difference between Monday and Wednesday, let alone grasp concepts like year or century. Their economic life simply didn't require it. Early hunter-gatherers lived by a very simple cycle. The animal came to the watering hole? Great. Roots and fruits grow year-round. They're in the subtropics, after all. That's perfect, too. They didn't need a complex system of dating. But everything changed dramatically when our ancestors transitioned to a producing economy. As soon as they needed to plant seeds, to reap a harvest instead of just finding food, the question immediately arose. When exactly should I put the seed in the ground? It was the first intentionally planted seed that started the clock of history. They had to know precisely when to sow and when to harvest. That's how the first definition of time, tied to the natural cycle, appeared. Initially, time turned into a circle. Spring follows winter, autumn follows summer, and so on. Forever. This circle had no past and no future. It was only an eternal rotation of the present. But then came trade and interaction between peoples. Say you do a great job with apples in your area, and 200 kilometers away, I grow excellent bread. We want to trade. To make the journey, you had to precisely calculate when you left, when you would finally arrive, and when you would return home. And right here, in the necessity of constant travel, the first sense of linear time appears. This isn't the eternal circle anymore. It's a segment with a clear starting point and a point where it must end. This led to the detailed subdivision of time. First hours, then, in a much later era, minutes, and finally, seconds. And naturally, there was a need to record this economic activity. Once records started appearing on clay tablets, the question was posed. When exactly were these pots produced and traded? That's how we arrived at marking days, weeks, months, and ultimately years. It was primitive at first. But then, as our distant ancestors, who had much more time than us, observed the stars, they tied their timekeeping to the movement of the stars across the sky. It all seemed logical, except for one very uncomfortable problem. Every nation had its own timekeeping system. Just imagine the confusion. A question for you, my curious friends. What year is it right now? You'd say, of course, 2025. But if we were living by the Byzantine calendar, we'd think it was the 7,534th year. Why? Because they counted time from the supposed creation of the world, which, according to their calculations based on the Bible, happened 5,509 years before the arbitrary point of Christ's birth. And for Muslims, say those living in modern Emirates, it's only the 1403rd year. Their count starts with the Hijra, the migration of the Prophet Muhammad from Mecca to Medina, which happened in the year 622 of our calendar. Can you see this absolute chronological chaos? How can we possibly study global history when every nation uses its own unique and unconnected timeline? This is exactly what the brilliant French scholar Joseph Justus Scaliger, 1540 to 1609, realized in the 16th century. He undertook a massive scientific feat, deciding to link all years and centuries to one single chronological scale. Scaliger took all the ancient chronicles available to him, and being a European and a Christian, chose the most important event in Western culture as the 0 point for his unified chronology, the birth of Jesus Christ. Of course, we understand this is largely an arbitrary convention. We know that scholars still debate the exact date, or even the historical details. But chronology is essentially a relative convention that we all agreed upon in order to finally bring order and launch the normal, systematic study of history. Thanks to Scaliger, we received incredible help, the value of which is hard to overstate. Here's an important detail that often confuses people. When Scaliger stuck his pin into the timeline, he didn't start counting at year 0. A segment can't be 0. 0 is a point. He started at the beginning of the first year of our era. That's why, for example, the year 2000 was the last year of the 20th century, not the start of the 21st. How our system works? After the birth of Christ, time proceeds normally, from the first century to the second, third, and so on, right up to our 2025, and infinitely into the future. But if we look backward, past the 0 point, the count goes in reverse. We say the 3rd century BC was earlier than the 2nd century BC. So, when you look into the past, the entire chronology is counted backwards, because the river of time flows toward the 0 point. That's why we use this system. Trying to understand history without grasping its chronological foundation is like trying to sail a vast ocean without a compass. I hope I managed to make this important lesson engaging. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I, for one, already find this absolutely fascinating. How about you?